Hello and welcome. It is Big Talk with Todd and Noah, presented by Xfinity. Glad to have you back for another week of college football in the books. We just got back from Minnesota. Yeah, fun week that we just had. Fun game over in Minneapolis, and overall, I feel like a great week in college football. Got to see some things clearer. That's where we're at, and we're a month into the season now. So the overall picture is taking shape.
Yeah, I think this is the time when you can start to really see, what's really happening, what teams are really legit. The only one that I would say, we know Ohio State's going to be really good, but we still don't know anything based on the competition level that they've played, but we know what their talent base is like. So, but for a lot of teams, they've played one and in some cases two quality opponents. And so you got a pretty good read on things. And I think that there's some surprise teams out there, not just in the Big Ten, but in college football in general, which is always the case.
No question about that. By the way, as mentioned last year during this time of the year, we've got the UN meetings here in New York. So if you do hear sirens, it's nothing that I did. At least I don't think it's anything that I did. But it is going to be a constant in my life for the next week plus, maybe 2 weeks. So I'm very much looking forward to sleeping through that. As we move on to first down and look back on some ranked matchups that we had in the conference last week, let's start on Friday, which was one of the best games of the week, and at least an exciting back and forth affair in Lincoln. Illinois, Nebraska, top 25 showdown. And boy, the Illini may be the surprise, certainly in the Big Ten, but maybe across all of college football so far.
Yeah, and they're one of those teams that I was mentioning that's played one or two quality opponents, and so has two really good wins on their resume. This was a great win for Illinois. They beat Kansas earlier in the year at home. Kansas is not quite the same as what they've been, but at that time they were a top 20 ranked team. But this was a legitimate win and a legitimate opponent. Nebraska was playing really good football. We know about the environment and the atmosphere there. It was a night game. And Illinois went in there and did what they had to do. And that came, I think, in two forms. Number one, Luke Altmaier, the quarterback, played outstanding. Took care of the football, threw 4 touchdown passes, but even more so did not turn the ball over. And then they had enough balance running the football, particularly late in the game, to where they outrushed Nebraska for the game. But they really leaned on their running game late and into overtime, and it was a great formula for success against a really good team on the road. So I don't think Nebraska played poorly.
No.
I was a little surprised that their defense was not better, not able to get to the quarterback a little bit better than they did. But I just think Luke Altmaier right now is playing at a very high level. He's playing as a very confident quarterback. And, that was a huge win for Illinois.
You've got to give Nebraska credit. They are still playing well, and we've seen already within the Big Ten that one loss this early in the season doesn't completely derail your season. That's a season that I think we expect Matt Rule to continue to have on the right track, but just so much impressive qualities about what Illinois has done and the season they've put together already so far this year. So looking forward to it. Nebraska did miss a late field goal in that game. That was very makeable. So it's just a reminder of how one little thing, one bounce, one kick, one whatever it might be, can completely change the course of a game and a season. But again, both teams playing exceptionally well, and which is great for us in the Big Ten, and looking forward to seeing what they can do the rest of the season as we go. Michigan and USC. This was one of the marquee games of the week around college football, a top 20 matchup in Ann Arbor, and it was Alex Orji's first start of the season. And so the question was, what's it going to look like offensively for Michigan? Well, in the first half, they had nearly 200 rushing yards, and they eventually just out-physical USC. They were down late. Kalel Mullings makes the deep run to set them up in the red zone, and they pay it off on fourth down and one of the more impressive touchdowns and efforts by Mullings to get it done. But what a win for Michigan in this one, and a welcome to the Big Ten for SC.
Yeah, a lot of really good things in this game on both sides of the ball. First of all, Michigan, you don't want to attach a must-win situation to that game, but it was a critical win. They would be looking at 2-2 had they not won. and they leaned on what their identity has been, which is their offensive line, their ability to run the football. They really controlled the action at the line of scrimmage, and they were able to pressure Miller Moss quite a bit. But credit to him and to USC and Lincoln Riley. They found a way to kind of make plays and get the ball in the end zone and make this game close and really put themselves in a position to win. And it's funny because as I look at these two teams going forward, I'm thinking, okay, well, with USC, you can't have your quarterback throw 51 times a game. You've got to be able to have a little bit more balance, a little bit more run success. And on the other side, Michigan, you can't have a quarterback who gains more yards rushing than he did throwing the football. I mean, he had, 30 some yards passing. That was good enough in this game. That's not sustainable, to continue winning in the Big Ten. You have to have better balance in that. So it'll be interesting to see, where that pass game goes from here with Alex Orji as a quarterback. But he was efficient. He took care of the ball. He didn't make critical mistakes. And, they were able to really run the football.
Which can be a recipe for success. Now, it's not going to win you a national championship,
right,
but it can win you a lot of games. And we saw that, which we'll get to in second down in a moment. But we saw that with Iowa as well. And Cade McNamara had less than 100 yards in that game. Alex Orji had less than 100 yards passing in his game. And both of those teams won their respective matchups. So it is a possible and feasible way of winning games. It's just how long can you sustain that level of play? And then if the running game does get stopped, you're kind of pigeonholed. Is that the right way? Pigeonholed, but you're pigeonholed down in that sense. So it will be interesting to see how Sharon Moore and company do try to find the right dynamic now moving forward the rest of the season. Second down we go to other offensive showings in the Big Ten from this past week. You mentioned Ohio State. Let's start there. I saw our colleague Nicole Auerbach tweet out midway through the first quarter, upset alert, Ohio State down to Marshall 7-0. So I turned the game on to see what happens. And then Quinshon Judkins says, no, there's no upset happening today.
Right.
I think that reminded us why they have the best backfield in the entire country. You've got Judkins and Travion Henderson that any given play, any given snap can break one on a home run.
Yeah, and I got to believe that Chip Kelly feels like a kid at Christmas every day he walks on the field, right? Because he's got so many toys and so many weapons, so many people he can distribute the ball to. It looks like Will Howard is getting more and more comfortable running the show, through for 275 yards and a couple scores. But, I mean, I don't know how you defend. They've got so much talent at the skill position, with the older receiver and Buka, the young receiver, Jeremiah Smith, who people think is going to be maybe the best that's ever played there. It all really just comes down to their offensive line. If their offensive line does their job and plays well, this is an offense that you're not going to stop. I mean, you're going to have to outscore Ohio State in order to beat them. And that's no easy task either, because they got a lot of studs on defense as well. So again, they've not played anybody that is close to their caliber. Michigan State will be a step up because it's Big Ten, but Michigan State is not an upper echelon team in the Big Ten either. So Ohio State is on a roll right now and really has not had much of a challenge.
What about Penn State? Number 10 team in the country last week. You play Kent State. It's not necessarily
worst
a program.
I mean, they may be the worst team in college football. I mean, so look, you play to a standard and you want your team to execute, and they obviously did that. But when you outgain a team 718-66, I mean, that is there is no greater definition of a mismatch than that, right? So, but I think the thing with Penn State right now is they are gaining confidence, right? Yeah. Drew Aller is playing very confidently right now. That's why it's going to be really fun to watch Illinois and Penn State, because you got two teams led by quarterbacks that are at a peak confidence level right now coming into this week of the college football season. But, they had balance. They ran for over 300 yards. They're distributing the ball. They may not have like a true number one wide receiver, but they've got guys that are making plays. And the biggest thing that we're seeing from Penn State right now, whether it's against Kent State or whoever it is is last year their biggest Achilles heel was not enough explosive plays in the pass game, right? Not enough downfield throws, downfield plays. And they are one of the best in the country right now at explosive plays. So that script has really flipped. Andy Kotelnicki, the new offensive coordinator, I think is doing a great job. And he, a lot like Chip Kelly, has a lot of, things to work with. And he's very creative also. So I think that you don't make too much of it because of who they played, but the execution level, offensively anyway, was impressive. And then defensively, they've been off to a little bit of a slower start in terms of creating pressure on the quarterback like they had been in the past. I think they were one of the best in the country at sacks and tackles for loss last year with Manny Diaz as the defensive coordinator. Not so great the first two games. They kind of picked up that part of their game a little bit last week as well.
Final one for second down today. It'll be our game, Iowa and Minnesota. And this looked like a Gophers potential win through the first half. After the last two drives of the second quarter, Max Brosmer leads his team down the field, looks really poised, really strong. They get 2 touchdowns. But, man, Caleb Johnson is impressive. I feel like that's the biggest takeaway from this game.
Yeah, I think so. And I mentioned this at the top of the show. He has great numbers. And he has continued to be on a tear. A big reason for that is the Iowa offensive line. And I think if they stay healthy, this is one of the best offensive lines that I've seen Iowa have in the last several years. Really impressive run blocking. They're not built to block 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10 pass pro the way some teams are, but excellent in the run game, excellent in the play action game and protecting the quarterback that way. So, and Caleb Johnson he's running with everything, speed, power, vision. He's doing it all right now at a very high level. So again, I would say this, that formula, and they're going to play defense, right? They struggled a little bit with Max Brosmer in the second quarter, and then they kind of went in the locker room and they didn't come out and do a bunch of things different. They just rushed the passer better. They just made the quarterback more uncomfortable. And, Max Brosmer looked like a different guy in the third and fourth quarter than he did in the second quarter. So that formula that Iowa has is good enough to win a lot of games. It's not good enough to beat an Ohio State, who they play next, right? They have a bye week. They need to fix their passing game. They need to figure out a way to get more chunk plays out of their passing game, probably off of play action with as good as they're running it. But you can't beat high-level teams in the Big Ten or anywhere in college football if you can't get explosive plays in your passing game.
They do put up 31 points, and that average on the season a little above 30 so far. Certainly better than was a year ago. Just some other notable scores. UCLA did hang with LSU through the first half. They looked good, and then LSU pulled away at home. They win 34-17. Indiana now 4-0 after the victory over Charlotte, 52-14. Maryland over Villanova, 38-20. Ty Felton continues his exceptional season with 14 catches, 157 yards. Rutgers still unbeaten, and there's a big season heading into the year for Rutgers. I think a lot of expectations in Piscataway. They've got a big one coming up this Friday against Washington, but they go to Blacksburg and get a win 26-23. And Michigan State, it looked like they were going to have that defensive slugfest in their hands. Boston College scores with about a minute 15 remaining in the game and eventually wins by 4 points. So Big Ten results across, for the most part, pretty successful. That Michigan State was a crushing loss for them.
Yeah, I want to comment on those last two games. I'll start with Michigan State since we ended there. First of all, again, they're not in the Big Ten, but I'm so excited to see what the impact that Bill O'Brien's having at Boston College. I really like OB. It's a great spot for him, and they are playing a high level of football. It's not always pretty, but they're physical. They're running the ball. He's got a pretty talented quarterback that he's working with, and he's great with quarterbacks. So, but Michigan State is showing a lot this year under Jonathan Smith in his first year. Aiden Childs, the quarterback that came from Oregon State, he's had a good season so far. The problem in this game, he threw 3 picks, and you can't lose the turnover battle like that in a close, low scoring game like they were in. They outgained BC 368 to 292, right? So they did a lot of good things defensively. They were in position to win, and BC gets a late touchdown pass to beat them in that game. And then, Rutgers, there's something to be said for this team and for this game. First of all, we've talked about their schedule. It sets up for them to have a lot of success because they miss a lot of the big boys in the Big Ten. But this is a good team, and they had to fight to hang on in this one. They had a 23-7 lead going into the fourth quarter. Blacksburg's not an easy place to play, so they shut the crowd down. They're winning 23-7, and then all of a sudden, Virginia Tech gets a couple back-to-back touchdowns, and the game is 23-23. So now they're in a dogfight on the road, and they did what they needed to do to win. They get a field goal late in the game to win the game. They've been doing it all year on a powerful run game, right? They were the leading rushing team in the Big Ten, averaging over 300 yards a game. They actually got outrushed in this game by Virginia Tech, only 153 yards, but the Greek Rifle,
Come on.
269 yards, no touchdowns, but no interceptions either. And Rutgers won the turnover battle 3-1. They were 8 for 17 on third down. They did what they had to do to win a tough game on the road. And now, this game, as you mentioned, hosting Washington on Friday, Washington's 3-1, a good football team, another big time opportunity for Rutgers.
Ethan Kaliakmanis. Still a top name around college football, and certainly a top nickname up there with my favorite nicknames I've called, along with Kyle Van Treese from Georgia State, who was the Ginger General. As we move to third down, let's just look through our games for this week.
Speaking of Ginger Generals, now a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement here around the Charlotte area because of what Andy Dalton did yesterday.
Oh,
Got
yeah.
The Panthers their first win of the year in very impressive fashion. So
I want to say, was he a combination of Van Treese and Kaliakmanis? Is he the Red Rifle? I believe he might be.
He might be. Yeah, he might be. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Sam Darnold's kind of a little bit of a redhead too, isn't he? Sam Darnold?
Oh, yeah, very much so.
So we got a couple of redheads getting after it in the NFL this year so far. Okay.
I like it.
Carry on.
Shout out to the Redheads. Let's look at our games for this week on NBC and Peacock. We've got a huge week ahead on our family of networks. Let's start noon on Peacock. Nebraska at Purdue. It feels like a bounce back opportunity for Nebraska in this one, and for Purdue, any opportunity at this point to just showcase growth and progress feels important.
Yeah. So first of all, with Purdue, obviously a better effort out of their team on the road in Corvallis against Oregon State, even though they came up down 38-21, but much better than they showed at home against Notre Dame the week before. They just got demolished. The problem is they still gave up 341 yards rushing to Oregon State. So, they've got to really shore that up. They can't let Nebraska come in there and push them around. They've got to stand up to the task physically. I would expect a big bounce back week for Nebraska. Again, they really did not play that poorly, particularly offensively. Dylan Raiola threw for almost 300 yards. I mean, he did a lot of really good things. They got to protect him better. Illinois had 5 sacks, and 3 of them came in that overtime period, which really sealed the game. But I think Nebraska, and I think defensively they'll have a chip on their shoulder coming into this game. Again, I think it's still a really good team. They did not play their best at home and dropped a game, but this one I like Nebraska going forward in this one.
7:30 p.m. on Peacock. Number 3 Ohio State in action. You mentioned the first potential test for them, certainly in the Big Ten now. They've got Michigan State this week, and a huge opportunity for Jonathan Smith in year one to just deliver a marquee win early in the season.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a tall task. The margin for error will be very slim for Michigan State in this game. A couple things you have to do to at least give yourself an opportunity. You got to keep the ball in front of you defensively. You can't give up big, easy touchdowns. You have to force this Ohio State offense to try to methodically move the ball down the field. And maybe they'll get bored with that. Maybe they'll make a mistake. Maybe they'll get greedy and you come up and make a play, but you can't give up easy scores. You can't get behind quickly in a game like this. And part of that is going to be, you got to take care of the football. For Aiden Childs, he threw 3 picks last week in a losing effort. He can't have a game like that. He's got to be smart with the football. They have to be great with their ball security. And those are just 2 of the little things they have to do to just give them a chance. It'll still be a very tall test for them.
Also 7:30 p.m. This one on NBC and Peacock. We will be in Happy Valley for a top 20 showdown now. Number 19 Illinois, number 9 Penn State. We talked about both teams and their victories last week. This just feels like it has a chance to not only be a great game, but we expect just a fantastic environment at Beaver Stadium.
Yeah, it's going to be a great environment. I see where James Franklin is encouraging the crowd to make it another whiteout game, even though this is not the scheduled whiteout game. So we'll see what that ends up looking and feeling like. It'll be intense regardless, because it's a night game at Penn State, and it doesn't get much better than that from an energy standpoint. I can just remember last year when Iowa went in there to play. It was the whiteout game. It was a night game, and they fell flat. And Penn State beat them 30-0. And it's such an intense environment for a visiting team and a visiting quarterback. Again, we'll get to see how far Luke Altmaier has grown and how far he's come. He went into Lincoln last week, which is a loud place. It's not 100,000, but it sounds and feels like 100,000 in Lincoln, and they're all wearing red. Now he's going to go into a place where they may be all wearing white, and we'll see how he performs in this game. So he's got a great one under his belt, though, from last Friday night, going into Lincoln. It's interesting. Last year when they played these two in Champaign, I thought Illinois was going to give them a good game last year. I can remember thinking that was a scary game for Penn State. It was their first road game. They're going to Champaign. Brett Bielema's team always seems to play pretty physical, pretty tough for Penn State. And it was a low-scoring, close game for a while. It was 13-7, I think, at one point in the half. And but the difference, Penn State forced 5 turnovers. They won the turnover battle 5-0. Luke Altmaier threw 4 picks. He was ultimately benched in that game and didn't finish the game as the starting quarterback. And so I'm sure there's a lot in his mind and his heart of wanting to come out and redeem himself and just show that he's a different player this year than he was at that point last year or other points last year. And I think he is. So far, he's playing like a completely different quarterback. And so I think it's going to be really fun to watch. Drew Aller last year, just okay. He was 16 for 33, just a little over 50%, 200 yards, no touchdown passes, but no interceptions. And that was the good thing and probably the difference in the game.
You mentioned it, 2 confident quarterbacks, 2 confident teams, and we're looking forward to what should be a confident matchup on NBC. Again, that's 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. Just across the rest of the Big Ten, just looking at some of the matchups. Washington at Rutgers mentioned on Friday.
Great
Maryland at Indiana. Minnesota goes to Michigan, who's now back to number 12 and kind of showcases the difference of the college football playoff expansion. It's a team that lost to Texas early. It doesn't kill you anymore. Doesn't completely derail you anymore. Same for USC, who hosts Wisconsin, now number 13 in the country. And Oregon still getting closer now to that matchup with Ohio State in a couple of weeks. They're at number 8. They go to UCLA to look to prove that they're back in rhythm.
Well, I think I'm looking forward to watching the Washington-Rutgers game on Friday night. I had a great time watching the Nebraska-Illinois game last Friday, and so I'm looking forward to that. I think for Indiana, probably their biggest test so far, hosting Maryland. Maryland can score. They can move the football. They're a good team. So that'll be a really interesting test for Maryland. I think for Wisconsin, for Braden Locke, who's the new starting quarterback, it's a whole lot better coming off of a bye week with all the preparation now going out to play USC as opposed to coming off the bench against Alabama like he had to do when Tyler Van Dyke went down with the injury. So they've had a bye week. He's fully established. It's his team now. It's his offense. So I'm anxious to see what Wisconsin looks like in that game, and also USC, just how they bounce back in the game defensively as well as offensively.
Let's move to our Xfinity Big Connections. And we talked a lot about our matchup in Happy Valley this weekend. Looking forward to seeing what it looks like on the field. But it's the first time since Illinois and Penn State are squaring off as two ranked teams since September 27th, 2008.
Wow.
So we're going before the world was supposed to end in 2012. We're going '08 for the last time. I don't even know what iPhone we were at. I think we were iPhone 1 at that point. But number 12 Penn State beat number 22 Illinois 38-24 at Beaver Stadium. It was Darrell Clark going for 181 passing yards, 3 total touchdowns. Derek Williams had 3 total touchdowns as well, including a kickoff return. Juice Williams, who had an outstanding career at Illinois, was the man under center, 183 yards, 2 scores, and a pick. But 16 years later, here we are, and we've got a ranked matchup between these two teams at Beaver Stadium.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a really good football game. And I think I think it'll be a true measure for Penn State to see where they're at. Again, 2 new coordinators on both sides of the ball. Tom Allen on defense. They had their best game of the year in terms of productivity, in terms of sacks and tackles for loss against Kent State. We'll see, if that continues. And so I think it's a heck of a matchup. And I can't wait to watch both quarterbacks play because they're playing at a very high level right now. And the play calling, I thought Barry Lunny's play calling against Nebraska was superb. And Andy Kotelnicki, I think, has done a great job so far. Again, he's got weapons. Those 2 backs for Penn State are both getting their share of the ball in the run game and the passing game. Tyler Warren may be one of the best tight ends in college football, very versatile guy. So very fun to watch. Very much looking forward to it.
First ranked matchup with these two since Michael Phelps won 8 gold medals. That's what I'm going with.
I remember, and I don't know, this probably wasn't '08, but one of my most vivid memories of Penn State and Illinois playing was the LeVar Arrington play when he dove over the pile and met the back right there. I mean, I have no idea what year that was. I just will never forget that play.
That's got to be a couple years before that, but an all-timer, and obviously LeVar an all-timer in Penn State lore as well. Defensively, just an absolute menace. As we go to our Xfinity third chair, a couple questions from this week. Fan-submitted questions presented by Xfinity. Is there a possibility, this is our first question, a possibility that none of the Big Ten teams go undefeated this year before the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's possible. It's always possible.
I think anything is possible.
For sure, it's possible. I mean, you look at Ohio State's schedule and you say, I mean, if they can get by the game at Oregon, that's the toughest one on the schedule, like right now on paper. You look, if they can get past that one, then, they've got Michigan at home. Michigan's not what they've been the last 2 years exactly, without J.J. McCarthy at quarterback in their passing game. So, yeah, I mean, you would say they have the best way of getting there, but that's what you love about college football, right? You're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids, although in today's world we got like 24 and 25-year-old quarterbacks that are playing their 7th and 8th years. But other than that, in most cases, you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds. And so it's you never know exactly what you're going to get.
Things happen, even with the Van Wilders of college football, things happen. And so you push forward. Speaking of pushing forward, Rutgers is doing that right now. Our second question, how high can Rutgers climb?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, again, we their schedule is very, very favorable. Now, that doesn't mean that they got an easy, going to have an easy week. This is not a team that if they're not on their game, they're not quite good enough, I don't think, to just, luck one out. They're going to have to play well the rest of the way. But I like the way they're built. I mean, they're built to run the football. It looked like the Greek Rifle looked a lot better, looked really good, was a good complementary quarterback last week. They're going to play solid defense with Greg Schiano. So I like the way they're built. And then their schedule, they don't play Ohio State. They don't play Penn State. They don't play Michigan. They don't play Oregon. And they don't play Iowa. And you got to say those are probably the 5 top teams in the league right now, right? So their schedule is set up for them to be successful. I could, if they stay healthy, I think they could win 10 games. I really do.
I think we said before the season that there's no reason they shouldn't win at least 8, just based on what they had and based on what they have to play. But yes, the ceiling should be double digits, no doubt. And Monangai has proven the last 2 years now, he's one of the best running backs in the country. He's going to get great blocking ahead. They're going to play physical, and Greg Schiano just has stamped himself across that program in his second go-around as head coach. So fun in here in New Jersey. I mean, I'm in New York right now, but fun here in New Jersey anyway. We still represent. You could
how cool would that to be? How cool would that to be to see if Rutgers, there is no East and West division in the Big Ten, right? So who knows? They could find their way to Indianapolis too if they keep playing the way they are right now, which is nobody would have guessed that, right?
The amount of Taylor ham in Indianapolis is going to be off the charts, TB. It's what I'm telling. And then the crazy thing with Rutgers is you go right into basketball season. They've got 2 of the top 3 recruits in the country coming in this year. So a fun time in Piscataway right now, both football and basketball. Again, you can submit your questions every week by using the hashtag Big Talk. Before we get out of here, you got to tell the people about last week, the Night Guard update. Huge news from a week ago.
Yeah, a huge win on a wet field, and it rained a lot all that day, and we were on the road, and just a really, really fun game. It was my first game that I was at. I've been at practice a lot, but I missed the first 2 games because of our travel schedule. So this was my first game to be there. It was a back and forth game, lots of big plays, lots of big mistakes. We ended up going to overtime and won the game 38-36 in 2 overtime periods. And it came down to we both scored touchdowns in that last overtime. They missed their 2-point conversion. We made ours, and it was a walk-off 38-36 win for the Knights. So really, really fun thing to be a part of. Now we turn around and got a big game tomorrow night against Latin. Charlotte Latin is a good football program. And we've got some guys that have been sick this week. We had several key guys miss practice yesterday. So we gotta get that figured out. Hopefully we get our strength back in time for the game on Wednesday.
Don't bring whatever illness is happening to Happy Valley, because Josh will not be happy if you get him sick. He said he's, quote, due. It's this time of year. I said, that's not the right mentality to have. So if you get him sick, he will blame you for the rest of the year. Just a heads up.
He'll hate on me then.
Yes. Yeah.
Whoever's on his list. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to Big Talk with Todd and Noah, as always, presented by Xfinity. Make sure you like, subscribe, and download on the NBC Sports YouTube channel, as well as wherever you get your audio podcast. You can find us here every week. We'll be back again next week to talk through everything Big Ten. Enjoy the football.